meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee for June 1st, 2015. We want to welcome everyone here tonight to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on behalf of any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you'll be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we will ask you to speak directly into the microphone. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Roll call. Walters.
Here.
Murguia. Here. McKiernan.
Here.
Townsend. Here. Walker.
Here. Next, we have the approval of the minutes from the March 9th and 30th meetings. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes have been approved. That takes us to the committee agenda. Item number 1 is a resolution setting a public hearing date to consider amendment to the Silver City Urban Renewal Plan. Mr. Goff, will you speak to that issue, please?
Good evening, Commissioner. Marlon Goff, Economic Development. We've also invited Mr. Jack Webb and Jeremy Rogers, both with the Unified Government Parks and Recreation Department. So I've prepared a brief presentation and discussion surrounding Silver City Park. Our staff had the opportunity to attend the most recent 2 park board meetings to discuss this particular park, its current status. In particular, our intent was to get an understanding of the current and future plans for the park. And so with that, we'll get into the presentation and discussion. So to start, this image, for folks in the audience and those of us maybe not familiar with where Silver City Park is located, so looking north, some of the landmarks are visible. We have the J.C. Harmon High School campus, and the athletic field here, and then Silver City Elementary School, just as you take Douglas Avenue towards the entrance to the park. It's just under 40 acres in total, but it's probably less than 10 acres, which represents the usable park grounds. So, it's been almost 20 years since this park was closed for public access. But during that time, the department has continued to maintain it. It includes mowing. It has a fence which secures, and we'll see in some of the site conditions and illustration we have further, we'll get an idea of kind of what the current conditions look like. But again, during those visits with the Parks Board, they've made clear that there is no current or future plans to, say, for example, add any park equipment or additional amenities to that park. So this is, panning in a little bit closer from that area view. You can see at the end of the cul-de-sac where you enter the park grounds, we can kind of see the outline of the fence here. And then there's actually a shelter house kind of tucked away, and there's a small trail leading to it. We had an opportunity to actually go out and kind of walk the site, before we, attended that meeting back in April. And, I was able to kind of slip through the fence and just get a feel of kind of what was out there. This is a photo of the shelter house. We can obviously see some graffiti, vandalism, got a little overgrowth in the trail area. So with that, one of the things we talked about as a staff is, what would it take for us to potentially market this site, for redevelopment? Obviously, it hasn't been a public, amenity in quite some time. The property was actually acquired from the Urban Renewal Agency in the 1960s. And the land use designated for the ground that encompasses this park is for parkland. And so for us to consider a change in land use, it will require an amendment to that urban renewal plan and include conducting a public hearing. in thinking about, some of the things we'd like to incorporate into a proposed amendment, certainly residential use is one that we feel pretty strongly about. And riding through and driving to the park, you notice that it's a really nice and mature neighborhood. Some older homes, but they're still well maintained. It's immediate access to the elementary school, high school, and Argentine Middle School is just to the north of this site. We've also obviously had some movement along the retail development in this particular part of the city with 2 new grocery stores. We got a new public library branch, and actually some recent improvements to surrounding parks. So the action item we have that we're seeking to advance is a resolution setting a public hearing to consider an amendment to that Silver City Urban Renewal Plan. We're requesting that this be fast-tracked to the June 4th full commission meeting. That'll allow us to properly notice the public in advance of the June 25th dates in which we're proposing to actually conduct the public hearing. And finally, this historical image was provided to us by Mr. Dan Welch. I like to refer to him as a park historian or enthusiast. He gave this to us at the last, I think the May Parks Board meeting, so I thought it'd be cool to include this with the presentation. My understanding is that this is the Easter celebration that they used to have at this particular site every year. And so he sits from a private collection, but based on the age of the cars, he said I would paint this image around 1948. So that's my presentation. Certainly we have Mr. Rogers and Mr. Webb available for comment. Again, here's the action items.
All right, is anyone in the audience wishing to address us on this subject? Seeing no one, I'll turn this over for discussion to the commissioners, or a motion.
I just move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that this item be approved and fast-tracked to the June 4th meeting, setting a hearing date for the city's Silver City Urban Renewal Plan removal of this parkland. Would you please call the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Mergia.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye. That brings us to item 2, which is the land bank. I'll ask Chris Slaughter, our land bank manager, to make a presentation.
Good evening. We have several items tonight. First, we have 10 applications. Majority of them are for yard extension, but we do have a development one and a single-family construction application. I can go over those addresses if you'd like, or if there's any comments or questions.
Any questions from commissioners?
No.
Move for approval?
Second.
We've had a motion and second for approval of the applications to the land bank for transfer of property. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Mergia.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Next, we have a transfer request from a property currently in the city of KCK to the land bank. Is requested by Mount Zion Economic Foundation, and if approved, we'll bring it back next month as one of the applications for approval.
Does this require a motion?
Yes.
Move for approval.
Second?
Motion and second. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Mergia.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Next, we have the best and final that we discussed last month. As a quick recap, I'd ask you to turn your direction to the map. The 2 applicants are Mr. Jackson, who owns property to the south, shaded green is the land bank property at 3530 North 35th Street. And the other applicant, Ms. Flores, is here at 3539. There was a request made from you guys to have them come here. They are both present and available to come up and comment or answer any questions that you guys may have.
I was not on this committee at the last month's meeting. I would ask Commissioner McKiernan to speak to the reason why we've brought him back, if you remember, or any commissioner for that matter. I don't recall that, because I was on the other committees then.
I thought you seconded my motion. You seconded my.
Did I?
Yes, you did. But it's okay.
It's okay.
The reason we asked him to come back
I'm
was
sorry, I was under the impression we had not made the transfer yet.
because we have not made the transfer, because neither of the applicants were here, and it was a best and final, and we wanted to hear from the two applicants to help us determine the decision of best and final.
Short memory.
So if, yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Sly, could you indicate again where the subject property is?
It's the shaded property right there. I know it's hard to see with the
Okay.
light, but that's the land bank property in question here.
Okay. That's better, thank you, yeah.
Well, then, I guess if I seconded your motion, I have no recollection of that occurring, but we would ask, I guess, Mr. Jackson and then Ms. Flores to address us as to their needs.
Good afternoon. As you can see, I'm the property owner at 3455 Bell Crossing, 3521 Bell Crossing, and 3518 North 35th Street. The property that I'm seeking to add to my property is that property number 3530 North 35th Street. The reason I'm asking to own this property, I've been somewhat maintaining it, keeping it clean, is right adjacent to my property. Of course, if you're familiar with that area, sometimes people like to come and, you know, that's kind of a dumping area where they feel they can dump without having to pay, apparently. And so I've been somewhat maintaining this property for a number of years. Actually, I seeked back in '06 through the land bank. I have a letter September 27th of '06 where I had tried to acquire that same property, but at the time, and I'm just curious what the unified government is doing, but it said at that time, this unified government was working to develop that area with developers. And that's the reason I was told at the time that I would not be able to acquire that property. So I've actually been seeking to acquire it since 2006. But again, I maintain it. I try to keep it clean. It's right there next to my other properties, and I would like to continue to do that, especially being in possession of it.
Any questions for Mr. Jackson?
I actually do.
Yes, sir.
So you own the property just to the south, and then you own the property that abuts Bell Crossing, is that correct?
That's correct. Mhm.
Which is a little bit further to the west. Okay, 3521 right there.
Right.
And so the other property then comes all the way from 35th all the way over to Bell Crossing. You own the ones that are to the west and to the south.
Right,
The
right,
other applicant has the ones that are to the north.
right. 3518 North 35th Street, that property is just a little south of that 3530.
Right.
It butts right up to my 3518.
Thank you.
And that 35th Street is a dead-end street, and that's where, like I said, people tend to like to, it doesn't happen often, but it happens too often.
Right, so
People will
you
come
are,
up there.
okay.
And
And
dump
are there improvements on any of the lots that you currently own?
I would say the improvement is maintaining, removing trash.
Okay, so there's no
keeping it clean.
structures?
No structures.
Huh.
I have a house on 3455 Bell Crossing. It's always been there. Matter of fact, that's where I grew up as a boy.
3455, right there. Okay. So off of Bell Crossing, which would appear to be north of your property, there's a large area that appears to just be dirt with either structures or maybe vehicles around the perimeter of the dirt. That's not your property?
I'm not sure I'm following where you are. 3521, is that?
I think it's north of his property.
Is it? Okay.
Glasses on, so I can see here. 3425. Right. Oh, that's me. Yeah, that's 3521. There's a couple of, I'm gonna say horse stalls I put up there. Okay. That's, yeah, I'm sorry. That is me. Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, that property that I was looking at does in
Yes,
fact
sir.
belong to him, so.
3521.
All right, that's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you for coming, Mr. Jackson. Tonight, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. You indicated that there's a residence at 3555?
3455.
I'm
yes,
sorry,
ma'am.
3455. Do you reside in any of these
No,
locations?
I do not. No, I do not. My cousin lives in 3455. She
Okay.
lives in that property there.
And there's a house, or there's not a house at 3518?
No, there's
Okay.
nothing there.
And not one at 3521?
No, ma'am.
And other than just keeping the 3530 lot, which is the one at issue, maintained by what, mowing, or what were you doing to maintain the lot?
Mostly trash removal, mowing and trash removal.
Okay. Okay, so what is, do you have any other intent with it than just to,
Well, it actually
to
depends
build
on
or-
the city of Kansas City, Kansas. You know, I would love, like I said, I grew up at 3455 Bell Crossing. My family moved out there in 1958. And I would really like to live out there, but it really depends on how, you know, I'm waiting to see, is the first letter that I had here back in '06, I was very hopeful that some development was coming out that way. And I don't know, maybe I have to be the first one to start the development, I don't know. But I would like to, you know, I would like to live out there since I grew up out there.
okay. And are you currently a resident in Wyandotte County?
No, ma'am, Johnson County.
Okay. Thank you. Those were the questions I had that weren't quite clear to me from the last presentation you did. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Now we'd ask Ms. Flores to come up.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Flores' daughter. I'll be translating for her. And we own the 3539 Bell Crossing. And the reason she wants the property up top was because 3 years ago they burned our house down, and she just wanted to make sure that having that land covering everything will protect us from getting harmed again by anything that can be, or anyone that can go there, because actually we also try to maintain our place because a lot of people like to go dump trash there. With a couple, she said a week ago, somebody went into her property and just dumped tires, a dead dog, and she's just trying to keep the area clean.
Do you have any commissioner have questions? Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you, Ms. Flores, for coming, and your daughter. Thank you. Now, I understand there was a house that was burned at the 3539. What's the current condition of that property? Were you residing there at the time the house was burned?
Actually, when the house got burned down, we were living in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had one of our close friends take care of the house and the place, and then the fire started like at 4 in the morning, so we don't know exactly how the fire started, but
So has the what is there on the 35, 39 lot now?
Not, right now, they just let us put a mobile home,
And what's the purpose and intent for having the mobile home there?
so we can live on our property again. We're trying to rebuild our house, but it's gonna take years, so we're trying to slowly try and figure out how we're gonna rebuild the house, and if, they let us rebuild it, we have to be there and, like, check everything out and make sure everything's okay before we even try to do anything with the house.
So it's your intention then to rebuild a house on the 35, 39 lot?
Yes, and,
Would-
which we want the lot a little bigger so we can ride a horse if we buy one. So we can have that space, clear out that space, which one is it? The 3530 North 35th Street. We would like to have that open space to ride horses.
So you intend to rebuild a residence
Mhm.
at 35, 39, and you intend to reside there or use that as rental property?
As rental?
No, I mean, would
Oh.
Ms. Flores be living there?
Yes.
When you rebuild?
Yes,
Okay, so you'd be on premises?
Yes.
Okay.
When you,
And
excuse me, continue.
have you ever, okay, well, I get it. You want to acquire this to, annex the land where you tend to live?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you for
welcome.
coming.
you're welcome.
Those are questions I
Any other questions?
not clear about last time.
Does Mr. Slaughter have a recommendation?
The recommendation last month was for Mr. Jackson, and we'll stand with that recommendation.
In light of this, have either party made adjustments to their offer?
No.
Okay. Well, my thought is that if we're going to have someone in residence there, and I truly appreciate what Mr. Jackson has done and been doing, but if you're gonna have someone who's living there and be closer to that premises, then I would prefer that buyer. To me, that just makes the more practical sense, although I'm very appreciative of what he's done. But that's what was not clear to me from the information at the last meeting, who was going to be living there, who was gonna be on premises. I think that would be a huge deterrent to, the vandalism problems and the trash. So that's what I would be in favor of. And I so move.
Second?
We have a motion and second for awarding the property to Mr. Jackson.
No.
Ms.
Ms.
Flores.
Flores.
Ms. Flores, okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Flores, any further discussion? None appearing. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Okay, lastly, just wanted to tell you about a program that we've been approached. It's through Wells Fargo, and it's their REO donation program. And what they've done is they've offered to donate to the land bank a property located at 630 Tenney Avenue. We would get the property free and clear, and it would be ours to do with what we would like to. I have been approached by a group that is interested in the property. They would like to rehab it, move a family into the premises. But there are other programs like this out there, and so part was to kind of let you guys be aware of these type of programs. Also, one of the questions that I had was, in the event that a quick decision needs to be made before another group could possibly grab the property up, And calendar-wise, between the standing committees and full commission meetings, you know, how do we handle those situations where I can't immediately get the decision from you guys? Is there, authority maybe that I could have? Is this something that maybe the administrator's office should take? I'm
Commissioner
open.
McGee?
Yeah, so Chris, what I would say is that if you have someone available to immediately take the property off your hands to get it back on the tax rolls, I think you should have that discretion to be able to act on that. If we're just acting as a pass-through, I think that's very appropriate. I can't really think of any negatives with that. So I don't have verbiage in front of me of what would need to be amended or said or to give you that authority, other than say, I would give you that authority. I would make a motion to give you that authority.
Agreed.
In future cases.
Is that what you're asking for?
Well, I mean, that's just partly how would we handle these type of situations in the future. For this specific property, I do need a letter of recommendation from the governing body saying that, the land banks program and what we're trying to do is kind of along the lines of what they're trying to do by get these properties back out. So I was gonna ask Commissioner Walker if I can just work with him to generate a letter of support, if you guys feel that would be okay.
Totally
Propose a
agree.
Motion to issue such a, Commissioner Townsend?
Could you tell me again, what is the donation program about, and what is the urgency? What is it that we're doing here again?
We are presented with a property that we would get free and clear to then dispose how we saw fit. And again, the way I would interpret it as being is we're given a house that we could then find a right party, whether it's a for-profit, non-profit, that could sit there, get the property rehabbed, get it back out on the tax roll at really very minimal expense to the land bank.
Okay, so someone is donating, basically. a
Wells
property
Fargo,
to
in
us.
this instance, it's Wells Fargo. We weren't the only group notified of this, so sometimes there will be some urgency to maybe be one of the first ones to respond or to fill out the application, which I'm right in the middle of now, other than trying to obtain this letter of support. So there may be times where we do everything and we don't get the property, and there may be times when we may be the only one interested in the property.
Well, and the reason I was asking is, I mean, we've had situations before where people have come to us to donate property to the land bank. So what is the distinction between those situations where we come here, we review it, and we move on, and this one?
So the distinction in my mind, and I want to make sure this is very clear, only reason I'm okay with giving you this discretion is because, Commissioner Townsend, what I understood is that there is there is a person willing to take that property immediately from our land bank and rehab it and
Oh,
sell it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And he's trying to respond quickly. The advantage to that in my mind is that the government, we kind of know what good not-for-profit and for-profit developers are out there, the ones that we can depend on. We also have a very long list of people that don't take care of their property through whether code enforcement or rental licensing. So we are in a really good position to judge the end user. We would never want to be beat out by, for lack of a better word, slumlord. But I would not be in favor of giving you discretion across the board without an end user.
And that was the distinction I was trying to hear.
Yes.
Okay.
And if I could just further clarify, primarily the donations that have been attempted to be made to us in the past are of vacant land, unimproved property, whereas this has an improvement on it that could, with rehab, be a tax-producing family housing property. So that's another distinction.
I don't even mind, Commissioner McKiernan, if it's vacant land, as long as we're just a pass-through.
Absolutely.
As long as we're gonna get it back on the tax rolls.
Totally agreed.
And we have knowledge of that buyer, that end user, and their quality, residents here in Wyandotte County, I'm fine with that. I just don't want you to accept land that we don't have an end use for.
Okay,
Is that the scenario you're describing?
yes.
You will have an end user?
Well, I've reached out to one and they've expressed interest and they've sent in a proposal of, what they would want to do with it. So I would feel confident that we have someone in mind. There may be others out there that also may express interest. It's just not widely known that we're in running
In
for
that
this
business.
property.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the difference too is that you have, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong in anything I say, you have enough land to market right now. We have thousands of parcels of land in the,
Correct.
right? Thousands of parcels of land in the land bank. We already own those, we're responsible for those. If there's any time to market with a staff of one, then we should be focused on those. The only time I want it very clear, I would not be in favor of taking on land without an end use. And I would really like to see the person making the request that wants to be the end user, that you have something in writing saying they're committed to taking it. I don't want them to get in it and say, it's a mess and it's gotta be demolished, and so now we don't want it. And by the way, Unified Government, now you have to demolish it. I don't wanna do that.
Okay, so,
Would you like us to come back with a set of parameters for that? I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I don't have anything in writing, it would have been better, but for his purposes on this piece of property, I think we can safely move it through to,
Yeah.
Chris understands.
Yep, nope.
He's
a
not
problem.
gonna do what we don't want him to do, but in the future, but in the future.
I think you'd like some, what we consider guidelines on, what exactly is considered a good end user.
Yeah.
So that it's not so
Commissioner
subjective.
Townsend.
Do we have a commitment on this piece of property to move it out of the land bank?
I would say we have a verbal and a written proposal.
If you
But
can get a
I
commitment,
feel
you
strong-
can
I mean,
accept the ground.
You know, I had the opportunity to show them the property. The realtor that's handled it allowed us to go in and look at it, and they were very ecstatic about it. But, you know, it's not my goal to accumulate hundreds and hundreds of houses so I can put them on a sheet of paper. So, I mean, there's programs like this, there's other programs out there that these opportunities could come up, but in the past, we've kind of just, I've had to back away and say, no, we don't do that. And again, I am also interpreting the ability to move forward on some of these as not just a carte blanche to go out and just start acquiring properties, you know, willy-nilly. So
Let's-
there'd be a lot of vetting in the process.
you know, coming up with some parameters for next month or sometime after that, should be what you're working on. For purposes of tonight,
Yeah.
what I seem to be hearing is because we have an end user, that we would be willing to, and I'm not quite sure whether we approve a motion tonight and then ask that it be fast-tracked to Thursday's meeting on a blue sheet, or do you just need this committee's approval to?
What I really need is a letter of support so I can finish the application. I don't even know if this property's still available.
All right, let's
But
just
the opportunity
simply
could
get a
still be there.
motion to authorize the issuance of that letter of support.
So I move that we issue a letter of support on this particular property and at a later date, receive more specifics on a policy.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Could we have the roll call, please?
Roll call Walters,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Walker.
Aye. You have
That's it.
anything else,
Thank you.
Mr. Slaughter? Thank
Nope.
you. That will conclude the meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. Does anyone need to take a break, or should we move into the next committee meeting?
Let's just go ahead and move into the next committee
All right.
meeting. Mr. Alvey was here, I believe he's in the hall. If we can just get him to come in, we'll move immediately into economic development and finance.
So who's gonna draft this letter? We'll draft it.
Administration will.
You wanna participate in the drafting of it? No, I'm not sure exactly what we just bring.
We got a house we can acquire and pass through. There we go. And that's all we did tonight, is one piece of property.
Yeah, I get you.
Mr. Alvey, good to see you.
Yes. Come on over.
Look, I saved your name tag for you. All right, we are, oh, where's your name tag? Terry, do we have a nameplate for? Do you have it over there? Okay. All right, so we'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment on any item is welcome at the time that item is up for discussion. If anyone wishes to make comment on any item, they would come to the podium in the center of the room, be recognized by the committee, and then make their comment. We do ask that everyone here speak as directly as possible into a microphone for both recording and for broadcast purposes. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alby.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Regia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. Our first item of business is approval of our minutes from our March 9th and March 30th, 2015 meetings.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve those minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Those minutes are approved as submitted. Now, everyone should have gotten both a blue and a pink sheet regarding our committee agenda tonight. Relative to the original agenda that was sent out, item number 3 has now been struck from that agenda. So what was item 3, resolution set public hearing for a CID, has been struck, and a new item number 5 has been added to our agenda tonight, and that is a presentation or a communication regarding motor vehicle renewal notices. In the blue sheet that accompanied that, you also got the text that goes along with our item number 1, which is the 2014 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. That is item number 1, a presentation of the 2014 CAFR, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to our entire finance team here.
Good evening. We are here to present our 2014 CAFR to Standing Committee tonight. The action that we are looking for is approval, and we would like it to be fast-tracked to Thursday evening's full commission meeting. Here with Lou and I tonight are our auditors, AGH, Shelley, and Tara are here with us, and I will let Shelley take over.
All right, thank you very much. Since, as I understand it, we will be doing a more detailed presentation on Thursday to the full commission, I'll keep my comments here brief this evening. Really what I'm reporting to this group here is just a couple high-level points. One is that we are issuing what's called an unmodified opinion. That in layman's terms is sometimes referred to as a clean opinion on your audit. That is the highest level of opinion you can get. So that's the result of the audit is a clean opinion, if you will. And then in the packet of information, you also have what we call our annual management letter. I'll go into that in more detail on Thursday, but just a couple highlight points. There are no new findings, no new control deficiencies or matters of that nature to report to you. We do have one repeat item from last year that is actually continues to show improvement, but where we still continue to recommend ongoing improvement. So we really don't have a lot to report because there isn't anything new, and just an update on a prior item. Again, I was just going to keep my comments here this evening brief, but would be glad to take any comments or feedback that you have before the meeting on Thursday.
Move approval, and then we forward it to the meeting, fast track it to the June 4th meeting.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to bring this forward to the full commission for presentation and then for approval. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alby.
Aye.
Walters. Aye. Regia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Because we can't.
Yeah. You guys go ahead.
All right. That brings us then to item number 2 on our agenda tonight, which is a resolution regarding Safe Routes KCK Walking School program. Mr. Bill Heatherman.
Thank you, Mr. McKiernan. This is one of those marked grants. Tonight's resolution would authorize us simply to move forward with all the KDOT paperwork, et cetera, And in fact, the only reason this one is different, it's a small amount of cash that's needed for our local match instead of debt. And so this is the actual initiating document that lets us move forward with the rest of the project.
Move for approval?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the resolution as submitted. Any further discussion?
I do have one little question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't read the details. I saw safe routes and I'm thumbs up on that. So, is this for, which safe routes?
What this actually does is gives us funding to support what's called walking school buses at 10 schools, which we are working with. Working with the districts. I don't have the list of all the 10 that have been nominated.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
And what a walking school bus is trained parents and teachers who help take the kids home and teach them safety and the joys of walking home from school.
Yeah, I participated in that in Rosedale, so, great.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alby,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Murgia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Heatherman. That, since item number 3 has been removed, that takes us to item number 4, which is a presentation regarding North Point Development Proposed Business Park. And we have Mr. Brakovich, Mr. Miles, Mr. LaSala.
Good evening, Commissioners. George Brakovich with Economic Development. Make a couple of quick introductions, but I think you know all these folks since you already said their names. Brent Miles with North Point, Todd LaSala. Brent represents the developer with the proposal for this site. Todd is representing the UG. There's a couple more people in the audience. Chase Simmons with Polsinelli is the developer's attorney on this deal. Craig Gaffney's here representing the current property ownership group. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. Phil Gibbs Jr. with Continental Engineering. He's kind of helped us with some of our corridor photos, and I believe he'll be may be involved on the developer's end for design. And Greg Kendall with Wyandotte, and then Anna Kerslig with UG Legal has been part of this. So Turner Woods, I think some of you are familiar with it because it's been around for a while and initially started as a residential TIF. And I think late last year, actually, the full commission approved an ordinance actually dissolving that TIF district as a residential area. And in somewhat recent history, we actually pursued a large fulfillment center here that ended up being a Macy's project that went to Oklahoma City. But they were looking for a site that could accommodate 1 million square feet under a single roof. And we quickly found that in the metropolitan area, there's not a lot of that type of land product available that still has close proximity to a road system that logistics facilities would need to utilize. And so kind of brought up the whole discussion back of Turner Woods and what are we really doing. And then we started to actively pursue developers that we knew were in the industrial segment of the market and see if they had some interest. Before we dive straight into Turner Woods, though, I wanted to talk very quickly about the Turner Diagonal Corridor. And Greg Kendall's here with WYDEC, and I know that they're pursuing a committee that's really looking at identifying new industrial space. And when I say industrial, we're probably more in the logistics, light manufacturing. It's not that heavy industrial use, that Fairfax, that heavy electrical supply. But there's a real need for something a little softer than that. When we look at the Turner Diagonal Corridor, to the north of, or the top of the page here represents north, is State Avenue. And then as you travel down Turner Diagonal, you're moving towards, you bypass I-70, you move down towards K32. There are a lot of vacant land opportunities here that could potentially serve some sort of light industrial logistic use. The pink highlighted areas alone represent KDOT right-of-way, and if you've ever traveled this area, you know there is a really odd system of meandering off and on ramps that just don't really utilize this corridor to its fullest. And I forget the total number of acres. I think it's spelled out there. I just can't read it. Of just putting that right-of-way into play, what it creates. But when we look at this, we see a corridor that could accommodate another 600 type acre site for bringing that type of product here. What really gets us excited then, State Avenue, we have a good transit corridor at 65th and State. You've got the Burke Technical Training Facility with a community college that can do training or on-site training. And so, we think this corridor has some great potential. At the very bottom of the page is the Turner Woods site that's 130 acres. And that's really what we're here to kind of talk about tonight, is some general deal parameters of what we think it would take to get that site developed. Again, you see it's just a slightly zoomed in image, 130 acres just south of I-70. One of the things you'll see though is as you exit from eastbound I-70 onto Turner Diagonal, approaching Riverview Avenue, you have a very short ramp system there. I don't know if this has a laser pointer, I think it does. So as you come off the ramp, there's not much capacity here to stack vehicles, in particular any sort of semi-trucks that would be associated with a logistics or manufacturing type, industrial type setup. So that would be one thing on the public infrastructure component that we would have to take a look at. And we've got some slides later in this presentation that talk about that. But in general, it's 130 acres. It's all under one ownership. We've got a developer that's interested in purchasing it. With that, here's the concept plan that they've presented, and it does show 3 buildings. And I think what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Brent to kind of talk about why they're interested and why they think this type of setup works.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, Brent Miles, North Point Development. I'm not sure if this is on. What we looked at was, much like other things that we've done in your community, we think we see what other people don't see. People didn't see luxury apartments at Village West, but we did. People did not want to take on tearing down 8 buildings at the public levy and going through the brain damage of 26 tenants and asbestos and environmental remediation, but we did. And we view this as our next business park at North Point. We think that the logistics of this site are tremendous. Your proximity to 70, 635, and 435. We think this is merely an extension of the Kansas Avenue corridor as you come up the Turner Diagonal. People haven't been able to see it, meaning developers, for mainly, probably in my opinion, 2 big reasons. They see the access as it exists today and not what it could be in the future. It doesn't accommodate an industrial park now because of what George said about the access. The off-ramp is don't drive it faster than maybe 25 miles an hour if you're out there. It is not meant for truck traffic or high speed. And second, if you ever get up on the site and you don't get lost in the weeds, this site has about $3.2 million of grading on it. It has 30 feet of cut and 30 feet of fill. It will take this might mean something to some of you. It has 1.2 to 1.5 million cubic yards that have to be moved on this site. It is a massive, massive, massive grading project. So you have to have a developer that's willing to pay cash for the land, which we are. You have to have a developer who's willing to sit on it essentially for almost a year as you do that grading, because it's going to take time to grade it and let it settle and surcharge and get all the moisture out of it. It's going to take a long time to do that. So you have to have someone that's patient, and that's how we operate. We're patient, but we're patiently waiting for the next business park because we think this is it. Finding sites of 130 acres with one ownership inside the 435 ring that can be zoned for industrial is a really rare find. Doing it in Wyandotte County is a plus for us because of our track record and relationship with the commission and with the staff. And then we view this, I know several commissioners, Commissioner Walker in particular, has brought up to me several times, I love what you did in Horizons, why don't you do it here? This is our version of Horizons here. I was thinking back, and I can't think of an industrial park that Wyandotte County has done probably in the last 20 years. Mr. Wilhite has done one-off buildings and built a portfolio, but not a park. There's not been something like this. Edwardsville is somewhat of a park, So that's probably your best example. But we view this, and having a park, Caw Point is successful for us. Our activity on Caw Point is super strong. I already have one lease done since I've seen you. I am about to land 2 to 3 more leases, in my opinion. That's a good indication for me that we'll be strong here. The downside of Caw Point is it's not part of a portfolio. Somebody comes in and we lease the whole building and they need to grow. What do you do with them? With a portfolio, you can say to somebody, you're in 100,000 feet now, we can grow you into the next building, 200, 300. That way, since we control the lease, we can rip up their current lease and move them in. That's one big benefit that Riverside Horizons has, and it's a selling point that we'll use here. It's a brain damaging project. We're used to that. $3 million of on-site grading. There's no streets. There's obviously no utilities. There's wetlands. I have 8 ephemeral streams I have to deal with. I have David Flick on our team working on that with the Corps of Engineers. Not to mention what George mentioned before, which is the public infrastructure component. You have to do something about the access, and then if you haven't been out there, I will use the word that I use, not Unified Government uses. You have a deteriorating bridge. You have a bridge that is in not very good shape now. If you haven't been by it, it has Jersey barriers. It's just not in very good shape. Comparatively, it might be in better shape than some of the other infrastructure, but just generally in long term, something needs to happen with the Riverview Bridge just because of its age and dilapidation. So that's our plan. These buildings we build, literally built a replica of all 3 of these buildings, whether it be in Riverside, Edgerton, or a project at 87th and 71, which we call Three Trails Commerce Center. It is an exact replica. We know how to build these. We know how to lease them, and we think we'll be successful with this plan.
Great. Thanks, Brent. One other thing I'd like to point out about the conceptual plan here is really the building sizes that are listed. As we start working on the agreement phase of this, these would be minimum square footage expectations. So building 1 at 391,000 square feet, and then building 2 and 3 at least 432,000 square feet. And that's important to remember because as we get into the incentive structure, there's a special assessment that's assessed on a per square foot basis of the building. So project details real quick, $69 million total capital investment. As Brent mentioned, $9 million for site acquisition and the on-site infrastructure and grading that the developer would be responsible for. And then we're estimating based on the current buildings they build and costs associated with that, with the minimum square footage, that for those 3 buildings it's probably at least another $60 million. None of that takes into account what the leases or the tenants that go into the building and the capital they're going to spend on machinery and equipment. We know that revenue doesn't factor in for us, but it does paint a picture of what's going in here. Potential for over 600 jobs. Worked with Brent to come up with an average of how many jobs they produce now in their current business park product over at Horizons, and using that average figure, and I can't remember exactly what it was, you probably have it.
Yeah, in Riverside, in the last 3.5 years, we've built 1.4 million square feet of industrial. So essentially, we've built Turner Woods in 3.5 years there. In Riverside, that's created 1,224 jobs. We have to report this annually to the city. I didn't do the math here, but I think that's 0.8 per 1,000 square feet. So here you say maybe conservatively you look at 0.5 per 1,000 square feet. That's where you get the 600 jobs. You might see 0.8 per 1,000. The average salary in Riverside for those jobs is $41,700. Again, we're required to report that and get it from our tenants for Riverside. So we have a pretty good handle on job creation and payroll.
And then we talked about it a little bit in terms of access to the site, but the Riverview Avenue bridge replacement alternatives. There's a clear line in the early discussions here that the developer feels that that's a UG cost to bear, and we think that getting creative in the incentive structure, there's a way to cost share using those incentives and help deflect some of the cost here. I think the next, so Riverview Avenue Bridge, this is an older image, but the image on the left is, again, as you pull off of I-70 and you're heading south on Turner Diagonal, you see that small stacking capacity towards Riverview Avenue. The bridge is in the distance, and I'm sure Mr. Heatherman could comment on what the minimum clearance requirements are from KDOT, but I noticed this morning as I was driving south, the first bridge I went over, it said, you know, the clearance height was 14 feet and some change. And then by the time I got to Riverview Avenue Bridge, it was down to 13 feet and some change. And there was a semi in front of me, and it made it through, but I'm not really sure what those requirements are. I'm guessing there is some sort of minimum. The image then on the right is the view from the bridge looking back towards the Turner Wood site. It's an older image because those side barriers are the original one that came with the bridge, and now we've replaced those with really sturdy Jersey barriers. The bridge replacement alternative, there's been a lot of discussion about this, and actually Mr. Heatherman had shared a report that Lochner did, I think it's dated January or December 14, where they looked at a variety of things. They didn't look just at replacing the bridge, but they studied traffic counts and peak travel times and who needs to come in and out, and they came up with a series of options, going to an at-grade intersection, so taking the bridge out and replacing it with an at-grade intersection, to a variety of bridge alternatives. Not just the bridge, but the series of on and off ramps and what that looks like. I don't have all of those numbers with me. I will tell you the range. If at grade, we were looking at a cost of $5 to $7 million perhaps, and the bridge replacement was north of that, 10, 11, 13 million. Magnitude of that, again, and those are just estimates that we've seen, but again, I think the magnitude of the cost will come in as we kind of talk about the incentive structure and cost. Good segue. So IRBs, we're contemplating the use of both IRBs and a CID here. It's a structure that might be similar because it's actually what we offered to North Point over at the Central Industrial Park site, which is the old racer site. So each building would be eligible for the use of industrial revenue bonds. Through that process, they're entitled to a 10-year pilot. We're proposing to have 100% of tax abatement during that pilot. In place of that, we would add back in for each building, concurrent with that 10-year term, $1 for per square foot special assessment. And then we would 50-50 share that special assessment with the developer. So they're paying back for their $9 million in site acquisition and grading and their infrastructure, and we're using that revenue to offset the cost of the bridge replacement. So one of the things, maybe a policy point discussion is, so that the bridge right now, and I think earlier today you guys were talking about CMIP. Last time I looked, I didn't see the Riverview Avenue Bridge on the 5-year plan. So, but we know it's an issue, and so we've got a project that's ready to go. Would we consider going somewhat at risk? Because even under this structure, and we've got a slide that kind of closes this presentation that talks about the UG's exposure on this deal. But I think it's something to think about. If we've got a deal that's ready to go and we can mitigate some of our risk by adding some guarantees on revenue generation from the developer on that, do we come out a little bit further ahead if we've got at least some new revenue that's dedicated towards that versus waiting and not doing anything on the site? Clearly, you've heard from the developer that the current access won't work for what they're trying to develop here. Okay, Todd, I don't know if you want to touch on some of these. These are some of the early things we're talking about, again, with UG risk and how we're trying to mitigate some of that.
Sure. So George stated the incentive piece of this very well. For each building that comes online, there would be 10 years of abatement. There would also be contractually 10 years of CID. And then in theory, for each building, as the abatement rolls off at the end of 10 years, the CID special assessments would end 2. But this agreement is fairly conditional in nature. It's conditional at the beginning in that the UG doesn't have to build the bridge or the interchange at all unless the developer says they're ready to proceed. Contractually, they would give us a notice to proceed, a notice to design, but they would only do that when they're locked and loaded and ready to go with that first 391,000 square foot building. If they don't come through with that between now and say, I think it's January 31st of 2017, then either party can terminate the agreement and walk away, and you do not have to do that interchange work. However, if they do come in and say, we're coming forward and we've got that first building ready to go, the UG then commits to that infrastructure and has to build the bridge. So it's conditional in that respect. It's important to also point out that in the structure we're working towards, it is really only the first building that would ever be guaranteed by the agreement. So if they proceed, it's really only the phase 1 building that would be contractually committed to. The other 2 buildings, I'm sure Brent would tell you, will be really based on market demand, and they may happen, but contractually they may not. So as George has talked about this structure, the UG is going to rely on that 52 cents a square foot to try and pay back the infrastructure. And it turns out to be a little more than $2 million a building if you're looking at a 390,000 square foot building. So we really wanted, we're working very hard to strongly incent at least a second building in the project. Now, North Point would never be committed to do it contractually, but if they don't, they have agreed to help mitigate the risk and the exposure to the UG on the interchange by saying that if they don't ever do that second building, our 52 cents of the CID remains in place, and it will stay there for the entire 22 years. So that gets us somewhere over $4 million against the interchange. Now, if they build that second building, if and when they do, then if it's after 10 years, the UG's CID on the first building would roll off. But that is really designed to strongly incent the second building and make sure that it happens.
Thanks, Todd. You know, to kind of touch on that, the current base taxes on that 130 acres is $4,900 per year. So our share of the CID on each building projects at slightly over $200,000 a year. And then, you know, as that 10-year pilot rolls off, those buildings then return to the tax rolls, and you know, then we're getting our regular share of the tax revenue that's generated. Wanted to try to at least touch on return on the investment for us. So again, you know, the site is currently sitting vacant, producing $4,900 a year in taxes. This project, it's projecting, you know, upwards of 1 million new square feet of industrial space. We talked about the 600 jobs. Brent mentioned the average salaries for a like project in the metro area. And, you know, again, from staff perspective, we feel that the UG has a partner here that's creating a product that allows us to cost share in some of our infrastructure needs on aging product that we know at some point we're probably going to have to address. So I think that might be our last slide. It was. We're obviously available to answer any questions you might have. I know it's probably one of the easiest deal structures we ever put in front of you, so there may not be many questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. LaSalle mentioned the word ready to go in terms of a building being ready, and at that point, the UG would become obligated to begin the bridge. What does that mean, ready to go? Tenants are in, or the girders are going up, or what does it mean, ready to go?
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, ready to go would mean we would essentially issue the notice to proceed. I most likely will do the grading after closing, just because it takes so long. Ready to go means I'm going to commit to building the first $20 million building.
Okay.
Plans are ready. I'm pulling a permit. Here I come.
Okay.
And then we're building these all speculative. So if we talk about kind of guarantee and risk, I'll put my perspective on it, which is I can't grade half a site. I can't build half a road. So I already have 9 million into it. The minute I start, I have 9 million into it. And then I have 20 million into it the minute I give you the notice to proceed, because I'm gonna build the first building. So there's 29. And then the guarantee, so I at least have 2 million of assessments. If I don't build the other buildings, I have 4 million of assessments that go to you. So I essentially have $33 million in the interest of building other buildings. I really have to build the other buildings to make to get my 9 million back on the infrastructure.
Okay.
Because the site is so topographically challenged that you can't grade half of it. You have to grade it all at once.
And there, just to add to that, Commissioner, there is a bit of a timing issue, because typically you guys can put a building up in 9 months.
We'll build, not all the demo and everything that you saw, we'll build Caw Point in 151 days. So we can build a 500,000, we're averaging about 130 days for 500,000 foot buildings in Edgerton right now. So they'll need the notice to proceed. The timing of it is important, because I can't open that building without the at grade there. So I have to time my notice to proceed so that the interchange, I'm gonna call it the interchange instead of at grade. The interchange is done as the building is being delivered. They'll coincide on a timeline. Interchange opens, buildings open, because the worst thing I could have is a building that has no access and I can't lease it and no tenants.
Well, that was a great segue into what would be my next question. From the time that the UG receives the notice, how much time would we have to, I guess, complete the desired improvements with the interchange and the bridge?
So I can pull it out. We're still negotiating
Oh, okay.
that point. For those of you who are around, this is similar. I describe this internally as similar to the Village West Phase 2 sewers. We had a notice to proceed scenario where we gave you notice. There was sewer that had to be built there. I was delivering apartments there. They were being built at the same time. Picture two ends of the railroad coming together, and at the end they coincide in terms of timing. I can't open my clubhouse or my buildings without sewer, so they have to coincide. So we're working on that now. Continental's helping us. How long will it take to grade, as well as how long does it take to design that interchange? How long does it take to build it? The KDOT, is there a KDOT approval process because of the distance to 70? So that's something that we're all working towards, is kind of a master schedule. Once I hand that notice, are they going to coincide? Or do I need to hand my notice and commit myself 4 months ahead of when I typically would start a building, to give you enough lead time so that we catch each other?
But the plan is to have those two complete at the same time.
Hopefully open the same day.
Okay, thank you.
Do I understand that we haven't decided whether we want to replace the bridge or do the at-grade crossing, or are we committed to the at-grade crossing?
Well, that's a good question. Public Works issued the study, and it listed a variety of options. I think within that report, the opinion was that perhaps a bridge could best serve, a replacement bridge with new ramps could best serve the site. As we started to look at historical information, though, we've already kind of done a switch to an at-grade intersection in the community, and that's over at State Avenue. So for those of you that might remember what the State Avenue and Turner Diagonal Exchange used to look like, great. For those of you that don't, I have a picture that I can share with you, and it's got a series. There's about 2 ramps that come down, and the traffic counts at that intersection are higher than what we're experiencing here, and so I think it's a good question back for Public Works to see where they're at, but I think from economic development, the way we're projecting our share of the incentive structure, we're in a much better position to cost share the at-grade than we are a replacement bridge. And if the at-grade is deemed to be suitable and doesn't present any life safety type issues, and we've already done one at State Avenue, why wouldn't we do it here?
Commissioner, from my perspective, you know, from the SID generation that we'll have off the buildings, the site can only accommodate so many square feet. Therefore, it can only produce so much SID. Therefore, it can only produce so much. And so, you know, our perspective is, when at build out, you're probably talking, I'm gonna give it a big range, 6 to 9 million of total revenue generated. 6 to 9 million from the studies that we saw can buy you an at grade. 6 to 9 million probably can't buy you a bridge replacement. Now, if there was CMIP or some other funding source that could come into it, that's a decision from you all. All I've told George is my site can't produce 13 million. It can't.
Well, I prefer the at-grade crossing. I think we cleaned up a lot of problems when we did what was done at State Avenue and Turner Diagonal, and made it a conventional intersection. And so that sounds good to me, but believe it or not, traffic engineers don't often listen to me. So, and I'm not one. But I like the idea of the at-grade crossing, but it is important, you know, when we evaluate this, if you're thinking a couple $100,000 a year if they build one building, and if we bite off a new bridge, that's a lot of money that we don't have unless, you know, all the buildings are built. So we're kind of in a predicament in that situation, right?
Yes, that would be my take on it. And, you know, looking at this map, you know, again, I believe this represents the current bridge location and configuration of the ramp. So, you know, to accommodate for that stacking and having a truck turn lane, even if you replace the bridge, you're still moving everything somewhere to the south. So, and again, I'm not a traffic engineer either, and I've had conversations with Bill Heatherman, and I know Bill has strong opinions about what he'd like to see there in terms of preference. But again, it's a cost decision, and I think that's the discussion. You know, again, from a policy standpoint, if we've got a project that can cost share and cover most of the cost, is that the direction we want to go?
And
provided it's a safe
in your
alternative.
diagram, the dark gray road that's lined in red, is that would be a public street, and that would be the UG infrastructure?
That's correct.
And then everything south, which looks like a driveway, would be
Yes.
the private?
That's correct.
And the private would still be public streets, because they're 3 lots,
Oh, okay.
just to clarify. And again, we're talking about the guarantee. You at least have a guarantee of 4 million. And again, my words, my perspective, not staff's, 4 million towards a bridge that I already think that you need to replace. That's my perspective.
Understood.
Just, I guess I'll be a little more direct on this. We're proceeding down the path on this, so we're going to an at-grade intersection on it, Commissioner. We have evaluated that through, looked at it. The premise of this project, their financial feasibility covers it from an at-grade perspective. There are good arguments as to why a bridge makes nice sense here, but I am proceeding under the position that we can do an at-grade here, and I've not been told otherwise why we could not. So that's where we're at.
Well, I think the administrator took care of the question that I was going to ask after listening to Commissioner Walters. Can we do this project even without the bridge? And it sounds like we're going in the direction of the at-grade, which sounds like it's more feasible economically, so.
Yeah, if there's a reason we can't do the at-grade, then we won't be coming back to you in the next meeting seeking approval of final agreement the way this is structured today.
So that means we'll have to have some more CMIP talks. Then again, I guess, okay, thank you.
Or we get Mr. Miles to figure out a new way to finance different.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Well, let me talk to Mr. Hagedorn, and I can tell you how that will go. But again, we looked at, again, it's a tough project, it's a tough site, you got the bridge. We felt I think all of us felt that have been working on this for a long time, that this was the solution that everybody could live with to get a foreclosed piece of property turned into 1.2 million square feet of industrial. This has been sitting foreclosed since '09. It needs some attention and it needs some capital, and we like to do both.
Any other questions, discussion? I think this is enormously exciting, and we look forward to having you back again and seeing a final proposal on this.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one more item of business. That was the item that was blue sheeted on as item number 5, a communication regarding motor vehicle renewal notices. As everybody knows, the state of Kansas has proposed to no longer mail motor vehicle renewal notices to residents of the state, leaving it up to the residents to remember when they are going to renew and to take care of that process online. And so we have Debbie Pack, who's going to give us a presentation, and I think, Mr. Bach, do you have anything to set this up, or?
I think Debbie can begin with the presentation about the situation, the analysis they've done, and then we can go for the recommendation from there.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Pack, Director of Revenue. I have Maddie Waldeck, my deputy, with me, and also Lou Levins just supporting me here. Basically, as Commissioner said, the state has taken a cost savings measure to not send renewal notices with detailed information beginning August, with the August renewals of 2015. They will be sending out a small postcard that just says your renewal's due. Here's your options to get this information online. They want you to go online and print your own renewal, or call them and type an option to have them help you out, which we don't see is going to happen. What we've come up with, we believe the potential impacts on the office is going to be additional calls to our phone banks, both 311 and the phone bank that we have in our office, for people to obtain their payoff amounts, obviously. We're going to have additional customers in the office. As you all know, or hopefully remember, we implemented a $5 walk-in renewal fee at the beginning of this year, because we're trying to encourage people to renew their tags online or by mail, because it's much more cost-effective for us. We feel that this postcard initiative by the state is going to be very counterproductive to that initiative. We also believe that it's going to increase delinquent property tax, because people are just going to downright forget. They're going to get a postcard and not know what it is. Basically, when I brought this to administration, I told them we had two options. One option was to do nothing, which was to allow the state to send the postcard and hope that our citizens got it and paid and were able to get this information. Option 2 was to print our own. The state is going to provide us with a file to print our own notices, from the demonstrations, it's going to be a pretty simple file. We've done some initial cost analysis, and in order for us to perform this with a third party to outsource it, it's going to be about roughly $45,000 a year. We have about 75,000 unique renewals that we send out in Wyandotte County. We also looked at performing this in-house, but didn't feel that was feasible with the resources that we have. Administration has authorized us to move forward with the bid process for outsourcing the printing of the renewal notices, which is basically going to have an effect in 2015 of probably about $20,000 on our budget, because it won't start till August, and going forward somewhere around $45,000. Now, on a good note, I got an email today that the Senate has actually gone in and revised one of the bills that they've got in place right now with their revenue bills, and they're trying to put this in statute that the Kansas Department of Revenue must provide this renewal notice. I don't guarantee that's going to happen. My proposal would be that we move forward under the assumption that we will have to provide these, and if by some miracle that doesn't happen, at least we're ready, because we're not going to have a very long time to produce this. We have to notify the state by June 5th which direction we're going, because they're not going to mail the postcards if we're going to print our renewal notices. So we're kind of in a short-term frame. So if anyone has any questions, it really doesn't require any commission action. It was more an information for you all.
Mr. Albee?
If we do not, if we go on our own and they do not send out the postcards, do they remunerate us?
ask for it?
No, they don't.
Of course not. So I'm assuming that the senators are receiving feedback from the counties complaining that this is an inefficient way to handle this. You have one spot that does it, now you're disseminating it to all the counties,
Right.
and that's simply going to,
It's going to create a lot of
Increase cost.
inconsistency because of 105 counties right now, there's about 12 to 15 that are going to move forward, are saying they're going to move forward to do it. So 90-some counties won't be getting renewal notices.
If I may add, just to give you the idea, the magnitude of what motor vehicle revenue is to the county, and all entities within the county, including the school districts and the other cities. The Treasury Office collects approximately $18 million in motor vehicle renewals. For our budget, the unified government budget, including city and county, our share of that's approximately $9 million. So it's a major revenue source to all taxing entities in Wyandotte County, and we just believe the postcard's a less efficient way to invoice our customers and for us to collect the revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Ms. Pack. So what is it that we would be sending out? Would we be, UG, sending out postcards as well, or the type of notices that the state used to send out with the more detailed information?
We'd be sending out the type of notice that the state used to send out.
Okay, thank you.
I will just say it was my analysis when I looked at what Ms. Pack had put together and thought about it from a business case scenario. You know, you're talking about the numbers Lou just put out there that were somewhere in the, what, 0.1% of the cost to do this billing is what you get back in revenues coming back to your community. If you lose, you know, 1/10 of those that were coming in to renew it, you're making a very bad business decision. I don't like this from the aspect that what the state has put forth is them just not taking responsibility for something they've done for years, where they've funded. It doesn't make any sense from that perspective. I don't have any bills that I get at home that I don't get a reminder from the billing company that says, here's your bill, and tells me what it is and tells me to go pay it. And most of them send you an envelope where they've worked out, they work hard to get you online for that bill payment. They don't try to go real lax about it, and here's a bill, you might want to look and see if you have something, and not even really be any detail, particularly something that's done on an annual basis. So it's really ridiculous thought process that's going through the state to throw this away, to say they wouldn't do this. But I don't know how we can be attentive to the needs of our citizens by not letting them know it, and then increase the level of delinquency where we have our citizens out there getting tickets because of this, and then we collect less revenue in the end. It doesn't take very many car tags to get up to $46,000.
And I too am disappointed that the state has chosen to shift another cost to the local level rather than continue to be responsible for it as they have been in the past. And even though we are currently trying to incent online renewals, we do know that there's a large percentage of our population who currently don't have access or easy access to the internet and to the ability to print those notices off or to renew online. And like Mr. Bach, I worry that we will see a great uptick in citations for expired tags, expired registration, and that in many cases it'll be a situation where the citizen has simply overlooked or forgotten or not been able to comply. And it's just going to create a lot more work across the board. So although I really don't want to spend this money, I think that it's a good, responsible move on our part to move forward with this plan as presented. So, any other comments, discussion, questions? We'll look forward to moving, and hopefully they will follow through on their teaser
Yes.
that they might continue to do this at the state level. That is our last item of business. With no further discussion, we are adjourned.